Anuraj rented the apartment on Sycamore Lane after a streak of misfortune left him with few options. The landlord, a stern woman named Mrs. Halverson, handed him the keys with a warning so curt it bordered on dismissal. Mrs. Halverson, don't mess with the sealed door. He hadn't noticed it at first. The door was flush with the living room wall. No handle, no hinges, just a seamless blank surface that seemed to absorb the light. Mrs. Halverson, it's been there for years. Don't think about it too much. Anuraj tried to heed her advice, but the door had an unsettling presence. The first night he heard faint scratches. It sounded like nails dragging across wood. He dismissed it as rats or the old building settling, but by the second week the noises became whispers. At first they were faint and incomprehensible. He assumed it was just his imagination until one night as he lay in bed, the whisper became unmistakable. Whisper. Anuraj. The voice was soft yet heavy, as though spoken from a place far deeper than the walls. His name wasn't said with affection or anger. It was said with hunger. Anuraj confronted Mrs. Halverson the next day. Her reaction was unnerving. She froze, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly as she said, "Mrs. Halverson, you're hearing things. Ignore it. That door hasn't been opened in decades, and it never should be." Then she turned and walked away, her pace quickening, as if she couldn't get out of the apartment fast enough. That night, Anuraj sat across from the door, unable to shake the feeling that it was watching him. The whispers started at midnight. Whisper, "Anuraj, let me out, let me in." The voice wasn't just audible. It felt physical, brushing against his skin like cold fingers. When he didn't respond, the wall thudded as though something massive had thrown itself against the door. The sound echoed through the room, shaking the walls. By morning, he decided to end the mystery. He bought a crowbar and returned home, determined to find out what was behind the door. The material of the door wasn't wood or metal. It felt warm, almost alive. When he struck it with the crowbar, it groaned, a deep, unnatural sound that vibrated through his chest. Cracks formed across its surface, oozing a thick black liquid that reeked of decay. And then the whispers turned to screams. Whisper, "Open it!" He staggered back, clutching his head as the voices screamed inside his skull. A cacophony of cries, laughter and rage. Whisper, "Let me in, Anuraj." Against his better judgment, he swung the crowbar again. The door split open with a wet, tearing sound. Behind it wasn't a room, but a churning abyss of darkness. Faces swam within it, disfigured and grotesque, their mouths moving in silent agony. Tendrils of shadow surged out, wrapping around his ankles, his wrists, pulling him toward the void. Whisper, "Join us, Anuraj. You belong here." The tendrils whispered his darkest fears, his hidden regrets. They promised freedom from guilt, from pain if he just surrendered. The pull was overwhelming, suffocating, but something inside him snapped. "Anuraj, no!" he growled, gripping the crowbar tightly. He swung wildly, the metal biting into the writhing tendrils. They recoiled, shrieking in rage, but their grip didn't loosen. He struck again and again, each blow forcing them back an inch. Finally, with a desperate cry, he wedged the crowbar into the frame and pried with all his strength. The void screamed. The door collapsed inward, folding into itself until nothing remained but silence. When he opened his eyes, the wall was bare. The door was gone. Anuraj left the apartment the next day, refusing to answer Mrs. Halverson's calls. But even in his new place, the whispers followed him. Whisper, Anurat. We'll find another way. And sometimes, just as he's about to fall asleep, he swears he sees a faint outline of a door